Have you ever wondered why so many real estate photographers say that you have to shoot in manual mode in order to get good photos? Well, in this video, I'm gonna break down all the camera settings you need to get pro level photos that look like this, and this. And explain why shooting in manual mode is not the answer. So if you're new to real estate photography, this is the video for you. So the first thing that's gonna affect your settings is actually your camera and lens combo or your camera setup. Most real estate photos are shot pretty wide, and that's because we're trying to show, the whole space and make it look big. But some cameras have different sensor sizes, and that affects how wide your lens will look. So just to keep things simple, if you're shooting on a full frame camera, using somewhere around a 16mm lens is going to be right around where you want to be for most shots. But if you're on a crop sensor, which is a smaller sensor, you'll need to actually shoot on a wider lens, somewhere around maybe like a 10mm to get the same width. And if you're brand new at this and you're just trying to figure out what camera is right for you, I actually have a buying guide that I'll link below that'll give you a couple of different options at different price points. The first camera setting you need to think about is your aperture. In real estate, the rule of thumb is that you want to have everything in focus from front to back for like 99% of your shots. And there are times when you want to break that rule, maybe if you're wanting to get some detail shots, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. But for the majority of your shots, you're going to want to shoot at a higher number aperture to give you a nice sharp image from front to back. So we typically set ours at f9 for the majority of our shots, and that's going to give you a nice sharp image throughout. When you're doing detail shots and you want to isolate your subject, maybe you want to showcase some of the features of the home, like a nice faucet or anything like that. To get these kinds of shots, you need to do two things. One of those, which is you're going to zoom in to maybe somewhere around 50mm, and then shooting at a smaller number like f4. And here are some examples of what photos look like with those settings. Just make sure though that if you're throwing in detail shots in the mix while you're shooting, that you don't forget to reset your aperture back to f9 for your regular shots. I once was shooting photos and I dropped my aperture down to like f4, got a couple of detail shots. I forgot to move it back, and I shot the rest of the property at f4, and it didn't really look great. It had some shots that it was fairly soft. They're really not usable images, so just be caution. I'm cautioning you now that you want to make sure that you change your setting back to f9 so that you don't do what I did, which is completely screw up the rest of your shoot. Next camera setting is your ISO. The only thing ISO does is like boost the signal coming into your camera to let in more light. So the higher you set this, the brighter your photo is going to be. But it does come with a trade-off though, that the higher the number is, the more noise or like grain, is going to show up in your photos. So keeping this setting lower is going to make your images look cleaner. But cameras these days are really good. So I found that I can push it a little bit. I can shoot at a little bit of a higher ISO, and the noise level is still good enough that you really can't see it. So here's an example of a photo shot at 100 ISO. And then here's the same photo shot at 640 ISO. So honestly, I think you'd have a hard time even seeing the difference between these two photos. And especially when these photos get posted online and then viewed on someone's phone, no one is going to notice the difference between those two photos. But every camera behaves a little bit differently. So what I would recommend doing is running a test on your camera to see if you can see the difference and how far you can actually push your camera. Just for fun, here's actually the same shot done at 2000 ISO. So you can see that sometimes you can actually push it, but I don't recommend shooting that high. But for my team, we usually shoot at ISO 640 because it does end up making the shoot go a lot faster. And I'll explain how it makes the shoot go faster in just a second. But that leads me into my next camera setting, which is auto bracketing. When you're shooting auto bracketing, you're actually getting multiple shots of the same image at different exposures. That's going to allow you to get all the information you need from the darkest part of the image to the brightest. And then later on, you can blend all those exposures to get a final image. So for my auto bracketing, I set it up to 5 brackets at 2 stops apart. But here's the important part. You want to make sure that your camera is set to a 2-second timer. That way, after you press a shutter, your hands are off the camera for 2 seconds and you avoid any camera shake. Let's go ahead and grab a shot so you can see what that looks like. So you can see in the brightest image, you can see all the dark areas in the photo. And in the darkest image, you can see everything out the window like the sky. So what should you set your shutter speed to? Well, this is where we actually take our camera out of manual mode and we put it into aperture priority. This is going to make your life so much easier and make your workflow way faster because it makes the camera do all the work for you. aperture priority locks down your aperture, and then your ISO is already set. So now the camera just figures out what the right exposure is based on what it sees, and it sets the shutter speed for you. So all you have to do is set up the shot and press the shutter button. But it is a good idea to always double check the photo after you take the shot so you can see whether or not you're able to see the highlights and shadows. For your focus settings, you want to make sure that you focus on something that has a lot of contrast so that the camera has something to lock onto. And you also want to focus on something that is maybe in the middle of the room. If you focus on something too close to you, even though we're setting the aperture at f9, the camera set focusing on something that's super close to the camera, you might still get a slightly soft focus for the areas that are farthest away from the camera. And what I like to do is set my camera to single shot autofocus, and then I just tap the display to set my focus point. Next up is white balance, and for this, I set my camera to auto white balance. Most cameras do a pretty good job at being able to figure out what the right white balance is, but in some cases, in the cases where it happens to make a mistake, as long as you set your file type to shoot raw photos, you can make any adjustment that you need in post-processing. Now, there are other ways to capture real estate photos, and some people like to use what's something called the flambient method, where you also incorporate a flash shot and then blend those shots together in post. And that's also a great method, but it typically does take a little bit longer on site. And most of the big real estate media agencies that I've personally talked to, they all shoot HDR or high dynamic range, which is the method that I just outlined. It's just a lot easier and faster to get going, and it's easier to scale. And my whole goal for anyone new that's watching this is to help you figure out the fastest way to get up and running and making money. But you can't build a real estate media empire if you don't know how to shoot video. And for that, you need to watch this video right here.